Ontario Public Service Employees Union. Mr. Elliott. Good afternoon, sir. You have up to 10 minutes for your presentation. Questions will begin with the government after that. And if you could please state your name for Hansard as you begin.
Yes, my name is Leonard Elliott. Good afternoon. My name is Len Elliott, and I am a Regional Vice-President for the Ontario Public Services Employees Union. OPSEU represents 400 occupational health and safety inspectors across the province and over 130,000 members who are workers in this province. I am here today because the measures proposed in Schedule 16 of Bill 70 to amend the Occupational Health and Safety Act will negatively affect all OPSEU members. First, it will affect us as workers. Second, it will affect us as health and safety inspectors who work to keep Ontario workplaces safe. For the record, I am an occupational health and safety inspector. I work for the Ministry of Labour in London. I wanted to start my presentation here today by having a minute of silence, as we do every year on April 28th on the International Day of Mourning. As you know, that's when we recognize and remember workers who have been killed or injured on the job. But I can't be silent today. I have too much experience with what happens when employers fail to treat health and safety seriously. As someone who has dedicated his career to making sure every working Ontarian gets home from work safely, I have to speak up. I want to be a voice that speaks for those dead and injured workers. I am here to ask the committee to delete Schedule 16 of Bill 70. Please do not leave it as is or amend it. It must be removed. Schedule 16 gives the Chief Prevention Officer the ability to accredit a health and safety system for use in Ontario workplaces and then recognize employers who use an accredited health and safety system. It has been said that the stakeholders in this province want the accreditation process. In this case, stakeholders does not mean all of them. It only means employers. And I can tell you that the millions of workers who are also stakeholders in workplace health and safety have not asked for this change, nor would they ever. I want to make it clear that OPSEU opposes connecting any type of accreditation system with the way MOL conducts proactive health and safety enforcement in Ontario workplaces. Unfortunately, that seems to be what the government has in mind. In introducing Schedule 16, the Ministry of Labour sent out an email that states the Ministry of Labour wants to lessen the burden on employers by taking away unnecessary proactive inspections. Just think about that for a second. There is nothing unnecessary about proactive inspections. Field visit inspections are an integral part of our health and safety system. To whom are they unnecessary? Not the workers of Ontario, I can assure you. Our inspectors do tens of thousands of inspections each year, including thousands of proactive inspections. An occupational health and safety officer writes thousands of orders for contraventions of the Occupational Health and Safety Act that would otherwise not be addressed if we would not have gone into those workplaces. These are workplaces that could easily receive accreditation under the new rules in Bill 70. It is not unusual for employers to receive awards and be accredited even though their workplace are horribly unsafe. Want an example? Look no further than the West Ray mine disaster. West Ray received the John T. Ryan Safety Award for the second year in a row. Just 11 days later, before 26 miners were killed in an early morning explosion at the mine. Tragically, the worker that the company sent to the award was one of the 26 miners who died in the May 9th, 1992 explosion. Employer representatives and government bureaucrats would have you think that while the employers are working away in their respective workplaces, it is an inconvenience to have an inspector show up for a surprise proactive workplace inspection. But here's the thing, an unsafe workplace is an inconvenience too, a daily inconvenience that threatens a worker's ability to be healthy or even to live. Inspectors need to actually see the way employers run their day-to-day operations in order to determine if a given workplace is operating safely. And that only happens if the employers don't get advance notice of an inspector's audit. If we had to call ahead to announce our arrival, or as suggested in Bill 70, never be allowed to do proactive inspections, many workplaces might think they were safe and they actually aren't. That false sense of security based on ignorance could be deadly. The health and safety management system discussed in Schedule 16 is only a paper plan. And it is one thing to have policies and safety manuals in a workplace where everything looks good on paper. But when it comes to safety, the proof is in the pudding. there must be external enforcement by Ministry of Labour inspectors to ensure compliance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Health and safety management systems sideline workers, joint health and safety committees, and worker health and safety representatives. In 1976, the Ham Commission recognized that workers needed individual and collective participation in workplace health and safety. James Ham came up with the internal responsibility system that is still in use today. Yet even today, the balance of power when it comes to health and safety lies with the employers, not workers. Moving health and safety prevention to the boardroom to develop a management system moves occupational health and safety farther from workers and farther from solving problems on the shop floor. On Christmas Eve of 2009, 4 workers were killed and 1 critically injured in a fall from a swing stage in Toronto. That's when this Liberal government did a review of the health and safety system in Ontario conducted by the Dean expert panel. I attended every public forum of the Dean panel, including many Ministry of Labour meetings with staff, where we expressed our concerns and had some input as inspectors. Not once did inspectors call for or even mention a process that would limit their ability to attend a workplace in a proactive way, even with accreditation. And Dean didn't suggest lessening enforcement to accredited employers either. Why? Because our inspectors have investigated critical injuries and fatalities of workers in workplaces that would qualify for accreditation tomorrow. We, the workers of Ontario, the real stakeholders when it comes to workplace safety, also have great concerns with the proposed changes to Section 7.7 of the Schedule 16. That section proposes that the Chief Prevention Officer should have the power to designate persons outside the ministry to look after accreditation and the many duties related to certification training. This change needs to be scrapped too. The Ministry of Labour should not contract out this role to a third party. Further, we have no idea what the accreditation proposal looks like. What we're being told is, here's the legislation, details to follow. That's not acceptable. Schedule 16 will increase the number of critically injured and workers killed on the job in my community and yours, wherever you live in Ontario. If Bill 70 goes through, I hope that the families of those dead workers will be able to hold this government accountable for killing their family members. If this goes through, you may have to look a parent, a spouse, or the child of a dead worker in the eye and tell them that you kept the Ministry of Labour health and safety inspectors out of their family members' workplaces, all because his or her employer was self-regulated and claimed on paper it was a safe workplace. You don't want to see that day. I urge you that you never have to. Proactive inspections are so important to protect the growing numbers of precarious workers in the province. Many of them do not have unions, they don't have job security, they may not know their rights, and even if they do, they are afraid to call the Ministry of Labour. Barring inspectors from proactively inspecting workplaces would have devastating effects on these workers. This does not match the Ministry of Labour priority to protect vulnerable workers. Our inspectors have the expertise, experience, and knowledge to do both proactive and reactive inspections. They do them now. Ontario needs both. On behalf of the workers of Ontario who want to come home safely every day, and also the workers who have been tragically injured or killed on the job, please get rid of Schedule 16. I presented to the Standing Committee on Social Policy in April of 2011 on Bill 160, where I said at that time, our safety, health and safety, is not up for negotiations. And today, I'm saying that again. This is not drama. This is real. Not all employers are bad. That's not my point. There are many good employers out there who comply with the law, and there are others who go above the minimums in the Act. Enforcement doesn't harm these employers, and proactive visits don't harm these employers either. But it's still a fact all employers need proactive enforcement. In closing, 2 main messages. 1, proactive inspections are a critical part of our enforcement program in Ontario. No accreditation can or will replace them and still protect worker safety. 2, the Ministry of Labour must not put any third parties in charge of occupational health and safety. Workers depend on the MOL enforcements and oversight for their lives. Please scrap Schedule 16. Thank you, and I'll take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Mr. Baker for 3 minutes.
Thanks very much for coming in, and thank you for the important work that you do every day. I shared with a previous presenter, I'm not sure if you were here, a little bit of my background story, and one of my first jobs was as a laborer on a site, and where we were working with heavy machinery and a number of other things that could have been dangerous to safety, and I remember how concerned everyone was about making sure that we that we protect the workers on the site. So I know how important it is, and I've also actually, unfortunately, was present when a worker did get killed in a different circumstance, not on that site, but in a different circumstance. And I know how important it is that we do everything we can to protect worker safety. And I think I speak for myself, but I think I speak for all of my caucus colleagues as well. I think the way I see this is that the legislation has been put together, and I think you referred to this in your presentation, and the details have not yet been mapped out, right, of what the accreditation program would look like. And I think that's right in the sense that I think the goal is that this legislation would facilitate the ability to design an accreditation process that the ministry could consult with you and other important stakeholders on. I know that proactive inspections, you spoke about the importance of that. That was one of your key messages to us. And proactive inspections are important today, and they will continue to be an important part in the future. I just want to read you a few segments of a letter that the Minister of Labour, Kevin Flynn, issued along with George Ritsiotis, the Chief Prevention Officer. I won't read it all, just a few selected elements, but I think they speak to some of the issues that you alluded to. The Ministry of Labour is looking to design a workplace health and safety accreditation program with the help of labour advocates and industry groups. As a preliminary step, we have proposed amendments to the Occupational Health and Safety Act. This proposed framework legislation would provide a pathway to allow the Chief Prevention Officer to work with you to develop an accreditation program. This addresses a recommendation contained in the Expert Advisory Panel report. On a separate line, no program design or standards are contained in the legislation. These specifics will not be developed until after a robust consultation with labour and business stakeholders. It's the intent of the ministry to consult extensively with labour and employer stakeholders on the design of the program and on standards for accreditation, as well as implementation. Labour stakeholders will be a key part of the consultation process to ensure their important views are indeed considered. Should the legislation pass, consultation will seek input on specific policy items such as implementation of a proposed accreditation framework, the components and elements of an accreditation standard, possible incentive framework to encourage voluntary participation, what health and safety programs must contain and how they are evaluated in order to be recognized by the ministry. Separately, on a separate part of the letter, some stakeholders.
Fortunately, you've used up your 3 minutes. Okay, well, Mr. Elliott, we're going to move on to Mr. Fideli or Mr. Barrett.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Barrett for 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, OPSEU, coming forward. I joined the union when I was 18, manufacturing. Got to go to the safety committee meetings, the union meetings, and then over the years I consulted employee assistance programming, actually, and everything was joint management union. Attended, again, many health and safety committees, joint union management committees. I thought that was a great idea. And from what you just said, I don't want to eat up the 3 minutes. I guess my question, what's happened here? Why are they doing this? And it almost seems like an end run. When I think of the principle of joint management working together, especially on safety, what's happening here?
What's happening here is a lack of transparency. In 2009, when those workers died, the minister at the time, I think it was Fonseca, asked for an expert panel review. And so they set up the consultation process ahead of time like they should do. And so the cart before the horse statement I made is do the consultation, have all of the input from the stakeholders. This was done without talking to labour. And as per the Dean report, the Dean report named the provincial council, which included labour. Labour got served this about 2.5 weeks ago and said, this is what we're doing. That's not transparent, and that's not what the Dean piece is talking about. So what we need to do is have those consultations, pull this piece, have the consultations, and look at what accreditation looks like. However, we would still not agree that proactive visits would be cut off to workers in this province. It's not acceptable.
I'm sorry, that what not cut off?
We would not agree that proactive field visits would in any way be cut off to inspectors. That needs to happen forevermore. Accreditation to a higher standard in a workplace above the minimums, we're very supportive of that. But not something that would then say, you can't come in here through a reciprocal agreement with the Ministry of Labour, limiting the powers of an inspector. It's not acceptable.
And I just, going back to my joint union management work a number of years ago, one of our principles, and it took time, sometimes it would take 2 years to set up a committee, say, with the steel industry. However, in the long run, it seemed to pay off, and I've always found that involvement breeds commitment. In the long
Sorry
run.
to interrupt.
I'm out.
People are having difficulty hearing you, so if
Oh,
you
I'm
could
sorry.
speak closer to the microphone.
Very briefly, in the long run, involvement breeds commitment.
Right. Absolutely. Involvement from both sides, which means
Exactly.
the workers on the floor.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
That's it. Thank you. Ms. DeNovo for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Thank you for your passionate plea here. Of course, late this morning, Bill 70 passed the House. Talking about cart before horse. Actually, one of my questions was going to be Toby's, which is why do you think they? So I'll rephrase my question. Who do you think benefits from this section? If it's not the workers, who benefits? Who had the Minister of Labor's ear that they went ahead? Do you think?
Large corporations, absolutely larger corporations, not all large corporations, and some companies. And make no mistake, they absolutely have policies in place, they have the safety manuals, they have full-time management and full-time worker health and safety members in some of those places. But I can tell you, orders have been written proactively in those workplaces. Critical injuries and fatalities have happened in those workplaces. And if they get to hold up a sign to keep an inspector out of there, that's going to continue to happen because we are an external auditing body, government, not privatized, body that comes in and audits the workplace based on being proactive, going in there and taking a look or a snapshot. To be able to hang something on the wall that says we've self-regulated, we've self-audited, we're good to go, that's unacceptable and we should not be excluded. And unfortunately, the legislation, if it's passed, to say that you'll have consultations after the fact, I still wonder what that'll look like, wonder what that legislation will come out, because now they fully have their agenda, they fully have the ability to do whatever they want by giving these powers to the CPO, and it's not acceptable.
And as you know, the New Democrats, we have opposed this, of course, and
Absolutely.
we've asked questions in the House on it. And when we ask questions of the Minister of Labour, he stands up and says, oh, we had stakeholder, everybody's on board with this. Clearly, everybody's
they're
not on board
Labor
with
was
this.
absolutely excluded, and after the fact says, we'll talk to you once this passes. That is unacceptable. That's not transparency that this government hangs its hat on and talks about, not to mention a socially responsible government. Shame on them for doing this.
And in essence, you've alluded to the fact that this is a privatization again.
It's down the path of privatization.
Like Hydro One, like the other privatizations we've witnessed from this government, this is yet again another privatization.
Yep. Where the board of directors of the inspecting body are the very employers that would sit on that board of directors that the inspectors would be going into and prosecuting. That has to be career limiting in some way and not acceptable. It must remain public.
Well, thank you for your passion. I hope you carried that passion in your discussions with the government, because they clearly aren't listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeNovo. Thank you, Mr. Elliott. If you have further written submissions you'd like to provide, you have until 6 p.m. today to do so.
Thank you.